Alright. Hello Ratbags, it's Jade with my 100 days of Core Keeper. My complete adventures, 50 hours of gameplay condensed down into just over an hour, showing you my progress, my farming, my base building, and of course more importantly, taking on 17 bosses. Will I actually manage to defeat them all in the 100 days? Of course you're going to have to watch and find out. Please leave a like if you find this video entertaining or useful. Let's go, 100 days of Core Keeper. So day one, and it's time to choose our character and the backgrounds, which give us a tiny little boost in certain skill stats to give us an upper hand and maybe some new gear. From a fisherman to a ranger, I nearly went for the mage, one of the two new classes that got added as part of 1.0, but instead I settled for the warlock. With the power of a book, I'd be able to summon minions to help fight alongside me. That would come in good time. First off, we get to grips with the giant caverns that we'll now be exploring and the core. This mysterious stone would guide us on our way, giving us hints and directions about which of the first bosses we would need to take on. It was pretty dark, so first off I had to start making this small area a little bit more habitable. That little bat, that's my little minion that I got from my special book. I was determined to use magic and the warlock class as much as I could, but we'll see how that pans out. I had some supplies and enough resources now to craft the basic tools, as well as get myself some storage and a crafting bench, but I was going to need some food, so I went exploring and dug away at some of the mushrooms. Cooking and food is a huge part of Core Keeper, giving you extra buffs as you progress through the game, unlocking new food types. And of course mining and digging for resources like copper, as well as these ancient gems. I cleared out some space around these mysterious statues, lit up the area and started smelting down the copper I just got. Now I could finally start looking and seeing what other items I could craft at the workbench, having already progressed and upgraded to the copper version. This gave me the opportunity to make the salvage bench, which is where I'll be able to reinforce my armour and weapons, or go ahead and dismantle anything that was either broken or not needed. So in no time at all, I'd already got myself some upgrades with copper pickaxe, as well as a small boost in giving me more slots by crafting the belt pack. I went and cooked the mushrooms that I'd managed to gather, giving me a nice boost in health regen, and checked out some of the new gear that I might be able to craft if I got more copper. The digging in this game is super addictive, but there's always some stuff that can help, especially explosive dynamite walls like this. The rest of the day was spent gathering more copper and resources before heading home and making sure I put the copper to good use. Reinforcing your gear is probably one of the best things you can do, as not only does it boost your durability, it also usually boosts the attack power. I had just enough also to go ahead and craft myself a copper sword. Having already sunk 200 hours into Core Keeper at this point on previous runs, I became a pretty dab hand at getting started, so I picked up all sorts of stuff including the mechanical parts, more slime that would be needed to make potions later, before heading home and making myself these rubber overalls, which were good at not making you slow when walking over any slime. You get 3 different gear slots to equip any different types of armour and accessories like the rings, necklaces and offhand items, which meant I could switch whenever I needed to for whatever challenge waited me. With all that copper, I was now starting to build up all the rest of the crafting stations I would need, including the glass smelter as well as the automation table, and looked at the tin workbench, obviously needing more tin. Automation can play a big part in Core Keeper if you want it, helping take care of mobs in mob farms or just helping you gather certain resources. But before I got too lost in technology, I went back to basics and started thinking about growing some of the seeds I'd also managed to find along the way, as these would be vital in growing me new foods to give me even better buffs. I had a tussle with one of these more stronger shrooms. They're pretty much like raging bulls, you just need to get them to hit something hard, and then you can do a ton of damage to them. Nabbed myself a special swift feather, which gave me a nice little swift dodge, and made it to the clay caves where I'd be able to hopefully find a ton of tin. By the time I got back, I had an inventory full of gear, including this witch doctor's hat, which would certainly boost my warlock class, giving extra damage to my minions. Quick harvest of the crops that were now fully grown, and it was the end of day 2. Cooking is super important in Core Keeper, combining different foods to get special meals that would then give you 2 sets of different buffs. Eventually you get so much food it's hard to keep track of what does what. The bomb spicy peppers were good for speed, the heartberries were good for health, then you had the glow petals which would give you a little glow as well as help rebuild your mana. On my travels I'd managed to pick up a special pet egg, and once I got the incubator crafted and placed, it meant I would spend a bit of time before eventually I would get my own little pet. Till then it was back to exploring and picking up some more tin, and I did come across one of these, a special scene. There's a huge amount of these in the game that often give you amazing loot and sometimes just some junk. When I got home I got attacked by these spiky boys. They're a slight upgrade on the regular orange slimes, as they will actually seek you out and do damage. And despite being a mage class, I was using the bow here to good effect. So I was making good progress. I can now go ahead and start crafting all the different tiered stuff that you use tin for, including automation, bait and musical instrument tables. Day 4 I came across my first locked chest. You can find or eventually craft your own keys, and these would often have loot from around whatever biome you'd normally find stuff. So in this case, lots of copper and maybe a few accessories and coins. My little subterrier pet was finally ready to crack open. The subterrier was a melee focused pet, and once he was in my slot I could start earning experience for him as he fought by my side and hopefully get him some nice perks. I'd found more eggs already, so I put them in the incubator and then set to work on getting some potions. And although I had the bench, I didn't have the materials, so I definitely needed to go and start farming even more. By the time day 5 rolled around, after taking care of another shroom, I'd hatched more of my pets, including an Owlux. Unlike the good doggos, these guys would give me a buff as they were passive, increasing my damage and movement speed. Never been a big fan of fishing in any game, but Corekeeper made it super easy with the addition of Quick Fish in 1.0. So I took a moment to relax before going home and starting to set up my special rooms for NPCs to come and live with me. Starting off with the special event trader. These guys, you simply have to put a calendar in the right sized room with a bed and a torch, and they'll give you access to special seasonal gear, some which can be pretty handy. While exploring, make sure you always dig up any X's. A lot of time it'll be just junk and seeds, but sometimes you get really rare items, especially needed to make better accessories later. I'd also come across an adventurer's hat, which would give me a general boost to all of my stats, before exploring these gentle meadows that had a variety of different cattle that eventually I'll be able to take back and have at my base. But for now, I was pretty much still in gather mode. Day 6, I remembered I had perk points to go and spend. All the experience that you get from doing things like mining, taking on enemies or farming, it all ends up getting used as long as you go and choose what you want. Each perk can offer a variety of different buffs and bonuses, and eventually you might have to make some choices. I would need all the help I could get with bosses later on, but our first encounter was going to be Glurch, the abominable mass, a giant orange slime. Either using the wet overalls that help you go over the slime quicker, or just making sure you've got something you can use to dodge out the way, and this guy shouldn't be too much of a problem. He is of course one of 17 bosses in Corekeeper. Trick with him is just to keep dodging obviously his big jumps, take care of any of the spiky boys nearby, and when he starts going turbo at 80% health, just make sure you either hit with ranged or you got plenty of heals for your melee hits. Once he finished making a splatter, I could go and see what loot I got and say hello to our second NPC. So much of the loot in Corekeeper drops randomly with different percentages, and you have to take on the bosses a number of times to get some of the best gear. So I wasn't that lucky in my first attempt, with only the melting ring being something worth maybe thinking about, but I really wanted to get a slime pet. Lots of the bosses are needed for progression, and certainly this one was, putting his eye inside the statue, unveiling the new scanners to find the next two bosses, Ghorm the Devourer, as well as Malugaz the Corrupted, and the ability to craft a slime sword, which is pretty good at slowing down enemies, and relatively cheap to make. I went ahead and crafted the Ghorm scanner and found him scuttling along. In fact, he's pretty easy to find, so you don't really need this. You just got to go in one direction and you'll come across the slime pathway that he basically leaves as he goes in a circle around the core. I'd made sure the new merchant was comfy and set up in his new room. His inventory would expand over time the more that I went and completed parts of the game, but for now the best thing was getting a curious egg, which would give me yet another pet. I'd also managed to get enough resources now to make the music workbench, crafted myself the cello, and hopped back over to the special door I'd found earlier. Music is definitely not my forte. It took me ages to memorise the notes, but I finally did it and could go and take a look at all the loot, which I'm not going to lie, it wasn't amazing. A pair of stone pants and some crafting materials. I rounded off day 8 by making some potions, some boost to my health as well as ranged and melee damage. Day 8 and my egg finally hatched. It was going to be the Amber Tail, which was great for ranged fire damage. I took it out for a walk for me as I went and got some of the iron that was now starting to find as I explored more of the stone biomes. Came across another one of the musical note doors, and this time the loot would be amazing, specifically the Scarlet Drill. With this bad boy I'd be able to dig through so many blocks really super quick. It was definitely a really lucky find. Day 9 was all about getting ores and smelting them down. I managed to pick up a ton of gold before then making more drills and setting up some automation around one of the ore nodes. Set up right, this would give thousands of copper ingots ready to be smelted, and you can even set up a smelter here so it would be cooked ready to go eventually when you returned in probably a few hours. But I definitely was going to need some more drills, so I carried on exploring looking for tin. Just before the end of day 9 I decided to revamp my base and give myself just a little bit more room and maybe a little bit of colour decorating all of these floor tiles. The boss fights were coming thick and fast now. It was time to take on Ghorm the Devourer. Ripped to the cave in there, taking 9,000 damage. Yeah, I'm not about to go melee that straight in his face. Set up some traps and hopefully this will do enough damage to trigger him to stand still. Basically, as soon as he takes a small amount of damage, enough hopefully, he will start going around in circles trying to chase you, which means you've got more of a chance of taking him on and defeating him. As boss fights go, they're pretty easy considering I've got hundreds of hours in the game now and I'm well used to what exactly is going to happen. But for the uninitiated, the slime can really slow you down and other mobs can get in the way too, so always still best to keep ranged weapons, whether it's magic or a bow. And obviously don't stand in front of him as he's starting to mow everything down. Some of the best loot here is Ghorm's bag, which increases your capacity, and I finally got a decent stave. Day 11 I started to set up some wood automation farms as I was starting to run low. By planting the seed in the right spot with these drills around, it would automatically harvest any wood that grew quickly. Carried on decorating the rest of my base and spoke to the new trader. By putting the core idol I got from Ghorm, I was able now to go ahead and buy summoning items to refight Glurch, Ghorm and the Hive Mother. And with Ghorm's horn in his statue, I now had access to the Grubzooka recall idols, which would allow me to teleport back home, as well as a large spike club. The Grubzooka's a fun weapon. It's basically a mortar that will blow up lots of rocks and enemies, but it also blows you up if you get too close. So I'd stick with my magic wand again as I was trying to flesh out my mage and warlock classes. Went ahead and used the scanner to find Malugaz. I'd built up quite a few armor pieces, so I was well on my way to making a better warlock class with either the chieftain or the witch set. My skills were coming along nicely as well, some of them nearly up to level 50. I was rushing the bosses now, so I decided to go and make a beeline for Malugaz, but I was maybe not anticipating how tough it would be getting through his dungeon. The Forgotten Ruins are home to of course the Cavelins, and more dangerously the Cavelin Shamans. RIP. I decided to go ahead and build a minecart rail all the way to Malugaz as I knew I'd be farming quite a bit. And then round 2 battling the Cavelins to hopefully get my lost loot. I'm starting to get to grips a little bit more now with summoning my little minion bats. They were getting stronger, as was my pet, which I had switched back over to the owlet. Owlux, you know what I'm talking about. Minions and magic are just about got the job done. Picked up another oracle card. This would be used to make the oracle deck really tough and very hard to craft, pretty much accessory. And then carried on through this dungeons that Malugaz is protected by. Cave trolls were no match for me and my bats. I managed to pick up another stave, this time the fireball staff, and I figure I might as well give it a shot in the near future. With all that loot, I never even made it to Malugaz before having to return home and take a look at everything I got. Come to realise I might need a lot more gear before taking on this next one, as it was definitely a jump up in difficulty. So plenty of crunchy tulip salad, giving me lots of extra defence as well as lots of extra mana. Before venturing back over to the dungeons to carry on clearing them out. Fireball staff was definitely high damage, but it was taking me a bit to get used to. In the end, with so much more loot on me once again from taking on all the pots and all the extra loot, I still hadn't managed to find the way into Malugaz, so decided to head home once more and try again the next day. On my adventures I now picked up enough to make the full-blown magic apprentice set, and I ended up actually getting distracted for a whole day going and gathering lots of iron. Day 15 was another day back at base, crafting and taking a look at some of the gear that I might want to use. Specifically the glow tulip rings would be good for my magic build. I made sure to reinforce all the weapons and armour that I could, now progressed to the full-blown Iron Age with the Iron Pickaxe, and cooked up some of the giant mushrooms I'd found that would give me a permanent health increase. Making my way back through to Malugaz, I found one of the smaller mazes if I could manage to find my way through to the centre. This actually would be crucial in crafting Rune Song, one of the most powerful weapons in the game, especially since it had the most recent buff. You needed the clear gemstone and a couple of other crafting items that you can only find in certain dungeons or mazes. There's only a few of them on each map, so I got that as well, set up a mining deposit, and then back home once more. It was time, day 17, to take on the third boss of Gorekeeper. After battling my way through all the fire mages, I made it to Malugaz's summoning room with this special crown that I was crafting out of some of the shards I picked up by defeating cavelins. I'd be able to refight him anytime I wanted. But I did the smart thing and set up a bed just outside the arena. With a good amount of meals, it was now time to take on Malugaz, and hopefully I'd survive. Okay, here we go. He's pretty fearsome, he does lots of fire damage from ranged attacks at the very first stages, and he can teleport all around his small arena. Not gonna lie though, my minions were coming in real clutch. Although they were still relatively low level, being able to summon 3 of them was doing a lot of damage as I tried to stay away from the flames. Oh, the flames! Oh, if you're doing this multiplayer, one of you should have maybe a watering can, as you can put the flames out, making it a bit easier to move around. But eventually I wore him down, and I was pretty pleased with myself that I defeated him so easily. But wait, had I? Oh no, that's right, he goes turbo, now he's in beast mode. Yep, now he's going to be charging at me with his flaming fists, as well as the whole arena being set alight still. My favourite accessory was definitely coming in handy, as I was trying to desperately avoid all the flames. It would only take a couple hits from this guy and I'd be brown bread. But eventually I would win out. Yes! So what amazing loot would I get for defeating the toughest boss so far? Not too shabby. I got the Soaring Poncho, which is part of the next magic set, as well as a Shaman headrest, which would give me extra burning damage if I carried on using the stave. But I didn't stop taking care of Malugaz there. I carried on farming him over and over again on day 18 and got what I was really after, one of the rift lenses which would allow me to teleport short spaces, and accessories that would boost my minion damage. So over and over again I took care of him, in the process levelling up my skills as well as my minions. Through that I managed to now get pretty much nearly this full set of magic gear, the Soaring set. Although I wouldn't really end up using it, I was focusing on my Warlock, but more importantly I can now go ahead and put Malugaz's heart inside the statue and be able to craft the blue leather book, which would give me more magic damage, ancient knife which would do lots of critical damage, and more importantly the hologram pod, which would give me access to finding all the next set of bosses. Like I said, there's 17 of these guys. The first 3 would be the story bosses that you need to progress, and the next set were pretty much optional, but I wanted to see if I could take them on in this run, as well as all the summoning items needed for the story bosses. So use up the boss scanners, ready for my next battle, but first a little something cozier. I picked up enough pieces from the meadows and plains to build an enclosure for some of the cattle that I really wanted to keep hold of. These mummy milkers would eat an absolute ton, but the trade-off was the milk was pretty delicious and it gave me some extra armour protection momentarily. Then it was back to boss slaying as usual, as I ventured deep into, for the very first time, the lava and the hive territory. Again, a pretty big step up in difficulty taking some of these guys on, with the yellow burning acid on the floor, and so many of the larvae and the big grubs attacking you at any moment, as well as all the spike traps in the floor. It really is a tough place to go and explore. Now normally you've got to prepare a little bit before taking on the Hive Mother, but my minions, their shortfall is they would go and attack the bosses even when I hadn't actually hit them, and that meant they would start aggroing. This didn't end up going well. With the big grubs spawning, the explosive little mini ones too, all that acid, I was definitely going to be needing some luck to take on the boss first time. Oh, oh! No, this is bad. That was real bad. So yeah, it didn't pan out that way. This time, once I returned, I made sure I sorted everything out by getting rid of all the acid as much as possible and start digging myself a trench to stop a lot of the grubs from being able to attack me. This in place, I somewhat cheesily summoned all my minions, and this time I'd be a little bit safer until at least she started firing her acid, so as long as I was quick enough I'd be able to hopefully get out of the way. Also really good idea to bring a hoe with you to get rid of that acid super quick. All the little grubs and larvae, they couldn't touch me over on my little area, and I knew I could make some improvements if I kept on fighting them. So it took a while since my minions were still relatively low level. My Embertail pet, which I'd swapped out for, was doing pretty good damage as long as we could get shots in between the grubs. But eventually I got the killing blow. Yes! There we go. The larvae armor pieces would give me some extra mining damage, but did slow you down, although they would keep you incognito, i.e. the grubs would leave you alone as long as you had 2 pieces on. But the rest of the loot was kind of weak sauce, so I decided quickly to go ahead and carry on farming the Hive Mother. I tried being a bit of a smart ass and see if I could take it on now without using my little ditch, but it didn't take long for me to realise this was maybe a mistake. So I hastily retreated to hopefully the semi-comfort of my little landing. And it definitely worked. Although the loot wasn't that much better, just lots more resources, as well as these hive bone pants which did thorn damage. But that was enough farming for now. It was time to head home on my minecart track that I'd laid down, just like I had done with Malugaz. So now with the first 4 set of bosses completed, it was time to venture beyond the wall. There was a barrier that you cannot get past until you defeated Malugaz, Glurch and Ghorm. But I did get a little bit chicken and realised that I might need a few more resources, especially some healing potions and some better food before exploring the Azeos wilderness. So I spent the next day, day 22, going around and gathering more resources, particularly looking for any more kind of food that would be helpful. I missed the waypoint that was near Glurch, as one of these is near every single boss except the ones that move around. And while exploring, I found some curious artifacts, including this massive ammonite necklace inside this shell, a decent boost to armor and health for early game melee users, and then came across the husk of something pretty horrific. And by the end of the day, I had just enough time to go and check on my cattle, and I started to realise they were producing resources. I was getting lots of fur and the bambuck milk, and hopefully, maybe if I can get some more, I'd be able to start breeding them. I knew where to go next because I spoke to the core, which always gives you the rough general direction of the next boss you should take on. And then it was off exploring through the lush green wilderness of Azeos. I actually got really lucky. You're meant to find enough feathers to use the scanner to find where the boss is, but I managed to come across it naturally. But I did want to spend some time collecting resources and exploring, specifically looking for stuff like the scarlet ore. Scarlet ore can be some of the most important metals in the game, as it really unlocks a lot of the automation. I did also come across a couple of lively eggs, which I knew would be handy for a specific pet later on. So after some small prep, getting better foods, namely getting stuff that would help me speed and move around quicker, it was time to face the Sky Titan. By placing down the shimmering egg that I managed to craft at the hologram pod, I could face off against this fearsome bird that would fire off a ton of lightning attacks. These can be absolutely deadly if they catch you all in one go, so you really got to be careful of the circle that expands and contracts occasionally. Otherwise, these ones are relatively easier to move around in. I was trying to stick to my magic roots in taking it on by using the slime staff that I managed to get while farming Glurch. It wasn't doing a ton of damage, but because there were natural walls all around this arena, I thought it might be good, but in the end I ended up switching over to just a regular stave. As usual, the bosses do enrage at some point. With this guy, you've got to stop them from healing by the crystals, by actually destroying the crystals so they don't get a full reheal. But if you can craft any potions, or you found Ivy and managed to get the pet junior slime from her, then it stops creatures from healing. Well, at least 75%. But anyhow, I managed to defeat it pretty easily, to be fair, and I had my first proper soul power. Basically giving me a 10% chance to trigger one of the lightning charges that Azeos has to hopefully defeat some enemies. Right now it was all about getting as much of the scarlet ore as possible. I was starting to pick up more gear though, including the Wild Warden mask, which will basically help you if you've got a big focus on your pets. These would add a ton of damage for your creatures. I'd managed to nab some dodos this time as well while exploring, and I almost had the full contingent of cattle now. To be honest, they're all but mostly useless. The meat can be useful for certain instances, I think with more critical hits. And eggs can be good if you get them from the dodos if you get a breeding pair. But the rest, it's not necessarily worth having loads. Don't forget to hoe the ground anywhere near your creatures, especially for the ones that eat bugs, as this means they'll have a quick and easy supply with the worms generating more. Day 25 was a gardening day, taking care to plant any of the new crops that I might have got and also stocking up on my rock carrots. It's super important you don't neglect gardening. Even if you feel like you've got a ton of meals, always make sure you go and keep planting as many seeds as possible to eventually unlock the rare and golden seeds and plants that will give you much better bonuses eventually. It's so chill being able to make these gardens, but more importantly now, with all of that scarlet ore, I can now make automatic sprinklers. These are going to help massively growing my crops. Day 26, a morning of eggs, and then straight back into the Azeos wilderness to find Ivy. She was actually pretty close to Azeos, although I did have to use the scanner. What also I did find was the mold biome. Absolutely detest this biome, as the mold infection will stop you from healing effectively. Cavelins here are pretty tough, as well as the tentacles firing their little ammos. Although I had also picked up a couple of the lively eggs that should give me Owluxes, the fan hair was doing a good job in again using these poison abilities to stop enemies from healing, as well as doing damage with its range attacks. After surviving an ambush from some of the Cavelin little hunters, it was time to face off against Ivy, as I'd finally come to her lair. Just like all slime bosses, remove all the slime around, take care of any enemies and move some debris, and then you can get to work and actually having a fight. Although I did trigger this one just a bit too soon. Trying to use obviously my warlock and mage skills, it was relatively okay, although I did die at least once. This squish really got me. Ivy obviously does the same debuff to you that your fan hair does, so it was reducing my healing ability quite a lot, and of course walking over the slime also. Avoiding her projectiles is pretty tough, but the main damage is absolutely avoiding getting squished. Okay, I died twice, but this time I managed my parting shot to be the final blow and she was gone, which meant I could gather up all the slime, which was going to be super important for making more advanced healing potions, and I got a poisonous sickle, which was pretty cool. If you're doing a poison build, absolutely really useful for it. I picked up another piece of rune song on my travels, also facing off against some of these bosses, which was the broken handle. So I just needed 2 more pieces to make the fabled sword, which would prove very hard indeed in the end. There was a cooldown of 6 minutes before taking on Azeos again, and definitely wanted to farm it up to see what kind of gear I got, so I went back on day 27 and took it out again pretty easily. Managed to get an upgrade with the Azeos Feather Dash, but more importantly the Corrupt Warden Mask, which was going to be vital for my Warlock build, as it basically gave me another summons and extra damage for them. And then it was a round robin back to Ivy to try out some new methods and see if this would make the short work of her. Spoilers, it kind of works, but they will get broken in the process, but they definitely do a good amount of damage in the beginning. There was no dying for me this time. I took care of Ivy pretty easily while trying out a mixture of my new gear. The rewards weren't amazing in the first attempt. I decided to carry on farming as there was no cooldown in taking on Ivy. You just needed to buy plenty of the slime summoning idols from one of the traders. This time I managed to pick up Ivy's ring, which again is really good for helping out with that poison build. And then one final time for now, I got Ivy's trousers, which were really useful for that poison build as well. It was day 29 and back to Azeos again for some more chicken farming. For sure, with my experience, the fights were becoming a lot easier, as well as obviously the better and newer gear, letting my minions do the majority of the work as I run around dodging and destroying the healing crystals. So once it was dead and I plucked its feathers, managed to get myself a bunch of stuff, not really that amazing, although the ancient pickaxe definitely would come in handy for much later crafting one of the most sought after and hardest to get weapons. You'll have to watch beyond day 100 maybe to see the conclusion of that, but you can go and check out the live streams or the videos that I've done on how to get Soul Seeker. So I was really making great progress now with so much of the Scarlet Ore cooking. We was able to go and craft a bunch of new stuff, and I was building up good supplies of all the other ores and resources. Increased my inventory space with a Scarlet Bag upgrade, and on day 30 I did a lot more crafting and a lot more sorting of my chests, and I messed around with some more of my class armours and weapons gear. I found another musical instrument door in the clay caves, and maybe wasn't paying full attention to the fact that there might be dangers on the other side. RIP. I eventually made my way back, but the loot was nothing really to brag about. Day 32, it was back to Ghorm. I'd managed to find where his summoning stone was. You have to just basically run around his circle till you come across a larger area. And I was intent on doing a lot of farming. Why? Well, they were older bosses and I'd pretty much already gone past the point that I would need any of the gear. I was trying to be a bit of a completionist and get every kind of resource, and specifically try and get all the trophies from the bosses. The pot lid is a pretty unique piece of armour, but maybe not that great, as it only just gives a boost to your food consumption when running and maybe some critical damage, but definitely look cool. And yeah, that's pretty much what I did for the whole day, just doing nothing but farm Ghorm and seeing what kind of goodies I could get. This time the decorative skeleton, which is rare. A valuable lesson in not putting too many of the summon items down, as Ghorm almost destroys everything in its path, so never leave any kind of chest with your loot nearby, as you won't actually get any of the loot inside, it does just get destroyed. And yeah, it was pretty easy at this point. I was just trying out my various different armours and classes, getting multiple of the same thing. I then messed around with some traps and that did the job in at least triggering him to stick around. And eventually, after around 8 times killing him, I got every kind of drop that I wanted, including some of the rings and accessory pieces, as well as the armour pieces that you can only get from Ghorm. Particularly good for mining and more critical hit damage, but not so good for movement speed. Do let me know in the comments what's your favourite boss to go and fight and farm. The last big benefit of this is you're guaranteed to pretty much almost get a special pet candy every time, and that 5000 XP was definitely levelling up all my pets quickly. Here's a little view of some of the stuff I managed to get overall. Day 33, another day sorting my inventory. Before a more exciting trip on day 34, exploring more of the clay caves and the lava and hive biomes. Always found these quite challenging with the acid that burns, the spike traps, and these little critters definitely is one of the more exciting biomes to go and explore. And I figured since I was here anyway, probably time to do a little bit of Hive Mother farming. It really is a component of the game. There are so many drops that you'll only get from the bosses and with small chances to get it, so you do have to do quite a bit of farming to really experience and get all of the armour and different weapons and accessories. I made life a bit easier though. I'd plonked down a couple of turrets I managed to find while exploring the Azeos wilderness. Putting the spike traps on the summoning idol was also doing a good amount of damage, and I'd widened my little ledge so I could avoid more of the acid drops, and I made pretty quick work with my mage and my warlock builds. It's also a good way to get some of the larvae meat, which is pretty easy to maybe farm if you've set one of these up as a mob farm. Which you might be wondering, Jade, where's your mob farms? I didn't really go in for it on this playthrough. I started off with a couple, but I just decided I didn't really need to. There's some great mob farms out there if you really want to, but it does make the game super easy. You pretty much never have to worry about any kind of resource, as so many of the good farms that you can make will just drop everything you need. But with enough exploring and plenty of farming some of the bosses, we don't need to set massive complicated farms up. I did pick up some of the hive bone stuff, which is really good for a Thorns build, basically doing damage when you get hit, and rinse and repeated taking on the Hive Mother. Definitely want to see more of a use for the acid slime in the future, as there really isn't anything you can do with it. A few more kills and I was pretty much done using all of my Hive Mother idols. And overall a good haul of just resources and different arm sets in case I wanted to mix up my style. Little bit of rest and recuperation day 35, again taking a look at all the gear I'd accumulated, spending some of my skill points, and super grop growing and gathering with my Scarlet Hoe. Day 36 was the start of my adventures to a new biome. The sunken sea would offer new challenges as I tried to go through this beautiful yet deadly area, trying to gather enough seashells to locate one of the bosses, and trying to avoid the slippery slime that would send you off in random directions, making it hard to control your character and more susceptible from attacks from tentacles, crabs and more. I was going to need a boat to fully explore this biome, but at the moment I was slumming it with just some ground pieces that I was able to place. I did also manage to go ahead and pick up a new rune summoning book, but it cost so much mana to actually summon and use, I ended up sticking to my bats. Then came across a great find, a small little fishing village with a ton of bait and chests and more. But best of all, I managed to nab a boat. The slow one, I'll bet, it was still a lot easier using this rather than heading back home and having to craft one using up vital resources. The way I had the settings though, biomes would often bleed into each other quite a bit. so I was facing dangers from other more advanced biomes that I probably wasn't ready for just yet. Making my way through the biome, grabbing as much of the pine grapple which would help with melee damage, and then obviously lots of the pupaia which helped with range, I slowly made it to the next boss location. And of course I went and activated the waypoint that I knew would be nearby somewhere. Days 37 and 38 I spent a lot of time in base sorting out inventory and setting up a brand new wood automation farm for the new coral wood that I'd found in the sunken sea. There's so many methods to do this, but this is one that I'd found on the Steam forums, and it would probably hopefully generate enough wood that I could then start setting it up to make planks, which would be needed for a ton of new items. I'd managed to gather and smelt enough of the octarine ore to make the octarine anvil and crafting bench, and maybe ever so slightly more useful the new accessory bench, which gave me access to better and upgraded accessories. At this point I was joined by my good friend Ra-Akar, who came to help me out as I knew it would be tough taking on this boss as I hadn't fought it for such a long time. Omoroth, the sea serpent titan, is pretty tough, summoning whirlpools and whirlwinds, drawing you in and doing huge damage with the tentacles that it would spawn. But first I had to summon it properly, and that meant using the special bait I'd crafted at the hologram pod with all of the bait that I'd managed to find at the fishing village, in combination with a much better upgraded rod. It didn't really go well for me. I wasn't quick enough to avoid a lot of the dangers, and now because there were two of us, Omoroth's health had massively increased and the damage it was doing also. But yeah, I should have done a bit better than I did. It was kind of a noob's mistake just to literally get killed this easy and so quick into the fight. My second attempt didn't last that long either, as I got done over by one of the big massive tentacles. I've been trying to use my new summons once again, as I figured this would be a good opportunity, but no, third time I got killed within the space of a few minutes. Who said Core Keeper isn't a tough game? And by the time I made it back, the hero that she was, Ra-Akar, had slain Omoroth. So I maybe didn't deserve all of this loot or the soul from it, but I would come back and fight it again, and this time hopefully beat it on my own terms. Did pick up a ton of new stuff, including the moonstone and crescent necklace, with the necklace being good particularly for helping out with mining damage, Omoroth's ring which was good for stealing health and fighting bosses, and the moonstone something I didn't really use, but basically it would soak up damage as long as you had enough mana. I'd used the blue tome book to help increase my magic damage, but honestly long term nothing was going to be replacing my rift lens. So back to base and a quick admire of some of the loot that I'd got. Then back on the grind for more resources on day 40, gathering lots of ores, as I also tried hunting down more pieces for Runesong. Day 41, and still with the help of Ra-Akar, I started to explore some of the Desert of Beginnings. My Scarlet Drill had done really good work, and it was still helping out with just about enough mining the Galaxite ore. And of course with the help of the scanner we did find the next boss location, and we kind of rushed this pretty quickly as I was determined to get to some of the brand new biomes that were added as part of 1.0 very quickly after launch. But we definitely need to do a bit of work first, so we decided to clear out an area, make a little port forward base before taking the boss on. Using the thumper that I managed to go ahead and craft, it was time to face Ra-Akar, the Sand Titan. And again, because we were rushing, we found this boss fight incredibly tough. It moved around at pretty rapid speed doing high damage, as well as the little sand whirlpools it was summoning, plus the scarabs and its special triangle homing missiles that it basically would fire off. Top tips for this one are build little pillars everywhere so that you can hide and dodge these, as the triangles can do a good amount of damage. Or at the very least make sure you're as speedy as you can be so that you can try and outrun them. This was another fight that I found particularly hard, as I did die a few times. But Ra-Akar wasn't going to be able to solo this one on her own, as it simply just was too hard with so many other mobs. We ended up having to retreat back to the entrance to the arena so many times because we were just basically getting our butt kicked. I didn't have any real big advanced potions either, and sadly it got to the point that both me and Ra-Akar got killed, and even though we'd got the boss down to half health, it sadly despawned and we'd have to start the fight all over again. So quick stop at home, refueling on better food and better potions, and this time laying as many of these traps down. We didn't know if they'd work, but we figured we might as well give it a try. They may have done a tiny bit of damage, but honestly it wasn't that noticeable and didn't seem to be hitting it unless it was directly on its main body part, and then they would of course end up breaking anyway. For sure, up to this point, this had been the toughest boss fight I'd taken part in. And again, we did end up both dying and having to restart the fight one more time. This time we adjusted our strategy to hopefully make better defences on the entrance. But it was super tough, with the scarabs had blown up so many of the spikes. It was third time lucky on day 43 that we finally managed to get it low enough that the victory was close. With the Scarlet ore that I'd got, I'd managed to craft the upgrade bench and done a little bit of work on my bat summoning book, and I was also using new stuff. But again, I did die before we finally got the killing blows in on Ra-Akar. Its soul was mine, and now I didn't want to have to face it again for a long time. The most important piece of loot from Ra-Akar is the bug brain, needed to craft a special crafting station to fight some of the next set of bosses. We now had the 3 major soul powers, each giving us extra damage, with chances to do the attacks from the bosses that we defeated, but so much more work to do, and I headed home and refixed all my gear that was now broke. No time to waste. As soon as we defeated Ra-Akar, we carried on our adventures, exploring more of the desert beginnings and heading north as far as we could to try and get access to the crystal shimmering frontier. But before that, we did discover more ruins, and I would end up having to come back here as there was definitely some stuff I might have missed having not ventured too deep. By day 45 though, we just about made it. We was now starting to explore the shimmering blue crystal walls, and hopefully this would result in us finding lots of solarite, the new ore, and eventually some alien tech laboratories. This turned out to be just a small pocket for now. There are larger areas of the shimmering frontier all around the outer core, and you can find smaller pockets in each one of the major biomes. The biggest danger here is not just the mobs, but also the radiation crystals that you'll need protection against, or really quick with your mining. Things definitely start getting more dicey in this biome with the orbital turrets, as well as the ore guys here chasing us. Such a pretty biome, but so deadly. We carried on making as best progress as we could, trying to stay alive, and we found this amazing scene here, and we came across one of these guys, Solarite Snail, pretty much a gentle giant in a dangerous biome. You can get some solarite from them, but honestly it's not worth killing them. They can actually help dig tunnels, as they'll pretty much go through anything, giving it a good chance for it to naturally explore and open up areas for you. We were more concerned, me and Erica right now, in staying alive and not getting sick from the radiation. We did eventually make it to the outer core, otherwise known as the passage. This would absolutely take a long time for us to actually get into properly, as my mining damage nor Erica's was good enough to break through, so we had to rely on trying to find openings and passageways into the passage itself. It's a huge biome that stretches across in a massive circle, and it's the last biome that you can currently explore until they add new content in the future. It's super creepy and definitely not somewhere you want to spend too much time, but we were trying desperately to get some of this ore as well. Unlike a lot of the other biomes, the ore itself was this Pandorium, which wasn't in the walls itself. Instead you had to break open the small little piles of it. We did however get super lucky and came across one of the special crafting stations. It's the only place that you can make some of the Pandorium armour and new weapons gear. Eventually, once you get high enough mining damage, you will be able to take the crafting station with you, and it's literally tailor-made for the boss that you might encounter, which we wouldn't be defeating until the very end, if we're lucky. Erica had warned me we were in dangerous territory and maybe time to get out, but I was just desperately trying to get some more Pandorium before then we came face to face with some of the creatures that inhabit this horrible, dank, dark biome. Are incredibly dangerous, leaving these little explosive balls that can certainly kill you quickly. Day 46, just about managed to go back and get all my gear and hopefully start prepping for new adventures. Back to exploring the Shimmering Frontier on day 47 and getting much more resources. I was also looking for the Molten Quarry, as I knew I wanted to take on every boss slime and there was going to be one there. And luck would have it, I did come across one. This would be even more challenging maybe than the Crystal Shimmering Frontier. These flame moths are deadly, and the fire damage they do just never really stops. You definitely need some sort of protection, which later would require me fishing in the lava to hopefully gain some immunity to the flames. But right now my mage build just wasn't up to scratch, and it wasn't long before I was overcome. I returned on day 48 and we managed to keep exploring the Molten Quarry, finding the ruins of a once industrious age. But again, I felt like I still wasn't fully equipped, so I decided to go and explore more of the Shimmering Frontier and carry on getting more resources, particularly the corn and the rice flour, the sunflower that grows here, as these would give me really big boost to my magic and my warlock skills. As long as I could stay alive from these guys. Relentlessly chasing me around and doing shot damage, you never know which one's actually going to be a real crystal or death running towards you. On day 49 I realised I'd had a slime boss I hadn't taken care of so far and was definitely going to be easier to find. This was the Terraria crossover, King Slime teleported into the Core Keeper world. These are pretty good fights in terms of getting your XP boosted as well as getting some much needed smaller potions. But the main reason was you're guaranteed to get a slime pet with this boss, unlike the other slimes, as long as you can actually stay alive and finish the job. And in fact the slime pet from this guy gives you even more damage against bosses, so makes it one of the best slimes in the game. In fact, you get the same loot every time you face off against King Slime compared to the others, so it can be a great way to farm certain small bits. So, really pleased to get Pet Slime Jr. and some other accessories that would help me be immune against slimes and basically make them friendly. So only at the halfway stage and we're 45 minutes in, don't panic, the rest of this half is certainly going to go a bit quicker as I'm obviously getting more experience now, gaining more resources and stuff is becoming more easier. But I still had so much more to do. So day 50 was another prep day, taking a look at some of the fish that I'd managed to catch along the way and basic upgrades for a lot of my gear. Day 51, another run around the passage trying to gain new resources, and I came across this guy for the first time, absolutely terrifying, coming out the walls. Alongside the other creepy crawlies in this biome, really does make this level some of the most horrific to travel around. Before she left, Ra-Akar had donated me her Oblitera ray gun. This basically was great for mining, but also taking care of enemies. But its true form, once upgraded, now we was in the passage, would be the Stormbringer, pretty much the most OP weapon in Core Keeper. So that would come in good time. For now though, I still need to get as much of the Pandorium as possible. And of course, making sure to stay alive. I headed back for my body on day 52 and decided to explore more of the passage. There was mysterious ruins with a whole ton of loot, especially the upgraded jewels we would need to go ahead and upgrade our gear beyond a certain level. The way the upgrade bench works is you use the right kind of resources for that gear's level. So if it's something really early, it's usually copper, tin and iron, and then you progress through the different ores. So eventually you're upgrading with the special jewels and the Pandorium. Now these jewels you can only really get from certain places like the alien tech labs inside the Shimmering Frontier. So it was good to pick up even just this little blue sapphire, as it would help out a lot. I also had enough now to start buying some of the Pandorian stuff for crafting it, and I totally went for the Stormbringer. As I said, it's definitely one of the most OP weapons in the game. I would go ahead and craft and make pretty much all of this eventually, including the Chaos Staff and the special new axe, with the Chaos Staff firing random shots that give all sorts of different elemental or damage types, but sometimes can backfire on you as they often use explosive damage too. But the main thing was I picked up Stormbringer, which was called Lightning Blaster when I played it. It worked just like the Obliterate, but this time it would chain attacks up to 3 enemies when you fired against them, making it a really powerful weapon as long as you still had the right kind of build, especially with damage in your mining and melee. But time and time again for the rest of my run and over that time I would use this. I'd use the scanner to find the boss that roams the passage, much like Ghorm going around in the circle. This is Urschleim. All the wall is sludge and you have to defeat and destroy the 3 eyes or pink orbs for him to pop out. So it was going to be tough getting in front, and it absolutely will kill you if it runs you over. As of course I made sure to demonstrate to you now. I really didn't have the right kind of gear for this, but I was determined to try out the Chaos Staff and see if I could take on Urschleim. Remember, this is one of the final bosses that you're meant to face, and I had another like 8 or 9 to actually kill first. It was real slow progress, making sure I was staying ahead and trying to not get caught in any of the alleyways or in the passage walls. But with that final shot, Urschleim popped a horrible neck out and started firing and wailing on it once I got the right build, and it turns out, yep, the Chaos Staff just maybe isn't the one. High damage output, but just way too slow. So I decided to switch to Stormbringer, see if that was more effective, but I definitely had the wrong build here using my mage class. and in the end it didn't have much of an effect. I was definitely having to go back to the drawing board and come up with something better. Added to that fact that each time you did take a chunk of Urschleim's health down, she would get faster and faster each time that the rolling sludge would carry on. So I was definitely going to need something speedy, and that's what the Pandorium armour really gave, in combination with a bunch of other stuff, the speed to get away. Also still had to deal with so many of the other creepy crawlies in this biome. As you can see, I'd switched over to Prince Slime Jr, but yeah, things were really tough. And of course, in the end, I got caught out by running out of space. I really hadn't learned my lesson the next day on 54, as I tried doing it with my Warlock class this time, although I really wasn't intent on taking the boss out, I just wanted to get more of the Pandorium. But for sure, I definitely need to do more research or just get stronger before taking it on again. So at this point I realised I'd been rushing around trying to complete certain objectives, but really hadn't taken the time to prep. So it was time to sit back, relax, do a bit of fishing, make much better quality meals with the fish and all the other crops I've been growing, and pretty much mooched around for 5 days solid doing stuff around my base, like setting up my automation farms even better, as well as fitting a tutorial guide on all the foods, including what they all do. And always a bit of inventory sorting too. Day 61 I crafted the rest of the final scanners I would need to find the bosses like the Atlantean Worm, as well as all the Hydras. And despite all my prep and good intentions of being more ready for the passage, days 62 and 63 I was still having trouble surviving, trying to get more resources. So cut my losses, returned home and decided to do something a bit different. But it wasn't a walk in the park what I chose next to try and finally conquer the Molten Quarry. For nearly 3 days I ventured and battled trying to work out how to get to the Molten Quarry slime boss, as the labyrinth was just filled with all different ways to go and lots of burning enemies. But eventually I made it after many deaths and decided to take on the molten mass straight away, and again I was pretty unprepared. I hadn't even bothered picking up all of the lava on the floor, so this was even doubly hard. My soul powers were finally starting to do a lot of damage though. Maybe I could turn this around, maybe I could do it. Yeah, maybe not. Once again I just wasn't fully prepared, and even though I took a bit more precaution this time, the end result was the same. So perhaps suffering PTSD, I decided to go and do something completely different and went into the mole biome, try and see if I could get a Pheromoth, which I did manage to find eventually, but also picked up the Tome of the Dead. This was one of the last books that I hadn't got hold of, which would summon some ghouls. They would eventually add more books to it, so look out for a guide for me on all of them, but this was kind of looking cool, just it didn't seem to work as intended sometimes, as they often wouldn't always go and fight together. And then a whole host of activities from day 69 to 74, including checking up on some of my ore deposit drill setups I had, stocking up for more purple slime for bigger health potions, sorting out all my accessories with so many different necklaces and rings, and I may have involved myself in a bit of cheese by visiting other worlds freshly created to go and steal the waypoints. Yes, I know I'd soon be able to probably make my own teleportals, but they cost so much resources and I really was starting to worry I was running out of some of the stuff I would need for upgrades later. So by taking my character to other worlds and being a bit cheesy, I was able to go and get the waypoints closer to the original Slime King boss. And on day 74, while going to get more octarine, which I would need to make some of the best fishing rods to hopefully go and summon certain bosses and get certain fish, I discovered this room here. Now this is not a petal door, it's not a musical instrument door, it is the admin key. And again, if you want to see what this actually is inside, you'll have to go and check out my individual video on it. But it basically is how to get the Phantom Spark. Something we wouldn't maybe do in this 100 days. After returning home, went and checked on all my cattle and realised if I wanted them to breed more, I'd maybe have to get them to move a little bit closer, so set up some pens. They're not battery farms, I promise, they've got like one square to move around in. Although I had realised I was missing one of the cattle, the Bambug. So I scoured all the areas that I thought I might be able to find some in the hope we'd get one. Which I just about managed to get a couple, and that meant I could now breed every type of cattle. So now I had every type of cattle, including the Strody-Polies and Kelpal that I managed to pick up from the Sunken Sea. I decided to try and make some sort of automation feeding, but it didn't really pan out. So after a good rest doing all that, it was time once again to face some of the foes that had been the toughest, and Igneous the Molten Mass absolutely was. just roast me over and over again, but this time it'd be different. This time I would beat it, maybe? But finally, by utilising my chakrams, I managed to defeat it, and honestly it was the best feeling after dying about 6 or 7 times. Your reward is maybe a good armour set that actually stops you taking fire damage, as well as pretty much the last tier of Warlock class gear, the Grim set. I did get lucky also getting a lava spawn, so I'd have that as a pet, but to be honest they're not that great. They've got some of maybe the worst stats compared to some of the others. That fight was still tough, and I knew if I wanted to go and farm more of the boss, I would have to find some way to neutralise the fire. So I went fishing in the lava like I said earlier, and we managed to pick up the right fish this time. A quick stop back home to go ahead and cook them, and surprisingly it's not the larvae fish that do the job, verdant dragon fillets, they're the ones that you want to catch, as they'll give you 10 minutes of fire protection. Almost embarrassed to say though, even with the fire protection, I still died a bunch of times trying to take him on over the next 2 days. The fireballs were absolutely brutal when they hit, and yeah, I died a few times. But I got there in the end and picked up a ton more armour pieces, including more of the special magma lava set. Day 80 I went and hunted down more of the slime bosses, just to carry on getting as much of the armor pieces as possible, as well as Morpha's bubble bag, which was really good for extra mining and speed, which would be super useful for the passage. I was also picking up more sorcerer stuff here as well, as I was still missing a couple pieces for the full sorcerer gear. Not that I really needed it, as it was kind of the mid-tier mage set. Now that I had the monk robe, this was pretty much the most powerful magic mage set there. Day 81 I went back to take on the king slime again, and really I was just trying to get as much XP as possible and utilising some of the summon idols that I built a ton of. You got a random chance of getting them every time you kill a slime, so it wasn't really like I needed any of this stuff anymore. I was basically flexing and just trying out new stuff. And I was making really good progress in levelling up all of my different pets, so I had one of each at level 10. As I'd rushed quite a few of the biomes, I decided to spend some more time exploring some of them, like the Azeos wilderness and of course the Desert of Beginnings. Coming across some really cool scenes, and I definitely want to see if I can find every single one available in Core Keeper. Apparently this place is a great spot to get a certain special fish with the lava in it, and I even come across this ruined racetrack. And a reminder why I never use go-karts, because quite frankly they'll get you killed 9 times out of 10 as they're so slow and yeah, just not that fast. I started day 84 heading to somewhere in the Shimmering Frontier, trying to find maybe some alien tech labs. Along the way I came across this ancient guardian necklace, before eventually finding a proper laboratory. Remember I'd spoken about these earlier, this was how I would get the obliteration ray, or you would if you hadn't come across one, luckily like me, i.e. my friend give me one. But I definitely wanted to take part and see what the actual event was, because it's quite a challenge getting through this laboratory. You got a good chance of picking up rubies and emeralds and sapphires, depending on which of these Shimmering Frontier biomes you've gone and explored, i.e. the Azeos, the desert or the sunken sea. And each one might have a special arena where you have to keep this green circle going by staying within it, while also staying alive and taking care of any enemies. This is how you get the obliteration ray. It can be pretty challenging, and there's all different types. You might have a ton of mimites start attacking you, or a mixture of both. And things definitely got a bit hairy, as I had so many of these orbital turrets shooting their lasers. I thought I was in Resident Evil movie, you know, that one where he gets chopped to little bits. I kept weaving and dodging and just about held myself in this green circle long enough to complete the test. And of course now I could actually go ahead and get the last and final NPC. With the nuclear battery I would now be able to go ahead and unlock and buy the summoning item needed for the Atlantean Worm. I got some other good stuff as well, including emeralds and some necklaces that would help out minions, and absolutely some of my favourite sets, the Cosmo armour set, which helps a lot with digging. So back at base, checking out the hazmat stuff, and then I went and got enough coins to go and buy a ton of the special bait pillars. I spent the day upgrading some of my armour with all of the jewels that I was now starting to accumulate, and I had enough now Pandorium to go and buy the full Pandorium armour set. Honestly felt like I was moving around super speedily with the Stormbringer, almost unstoppable. And of course with my new armour set on day 86, it was time to face off against the sludge monster and see if I could finally defeat Urschleim. I definitely was moving a bit quicker now with this armor set, and it felt like I'd got together with the axe in perfect harmony, doing lots of high damage when he did pop out his horrible little neck. But the same old problems were applying. I was nearly dead there. I can't believe I managed to dodge it, but over and over again I just simply was getting caught either by the sludge or by other creatures. I was starting to think that maybe range would be the way to go. I simply was just running out of space too many times to dodge his sludgeness. But for sure the axe was a great addition, and hopefully it would serve me in good stead the next time I have the courage to come and face him. On a rest day on 87, I realised I still needed to craft a Hydra table. This was how we was going to go and find and scan them, and also obviously summon them forth. But I was missing a giant bug brain. So I quickly crafted some more thumpers and we headed back to the desert. Facing Ra-Akar solo this time was absolutely a lot easier, and I had about 30 more levels to a lot of my perks, as well as obviously much higher and better gear. Now I say easier, he still definitely was a challenge, and it was a pretty close call in actually managing to defeat him, as he did get me with his final shots. But the important thing was he was dead and I'd be able to pick up the item I needed. The bug brain was mine, and I could take this back now and go ahead and craft the Hydra table. Did also pick up the scarab legs as well, which was another part of the armor sets that I was looking for. I had a good amount of the galaxite solarite ores as well, so I crafted the table up and then took a look at what else we would need. The Hydras have to be completed in succession, starting off in the Azeos wilderness, then heading over to the sunken sea before finishing off at the desert beginnings. You may have already come across them burrowing underneath, but you can't actually fight them until you go and place the right summoning item. This has been the first time I'd ever encountered them, as they were all new as part of 1.0 content, and I was definitely going to need some practice. Started again on day 90, and this time I was a lot more successful. Heading over in fact to the Azeos arena, I noticed that creatures would often come by here, and this would be the perfect place to take them on. The key to success with the Hydras is knowing when to run and when to fight, and making sure you can dodge a lot of its lasers. It does also summon these little green centipedes too, but its biggest damage dealer is getting caught in its whirlwind sucking you in. As it expands, it pretty much does a huge amount of damage and can take you out almost in one hit. But I carried on in an epic fight that seemed to last forever, slowly whittling away his defences so he'd be stunned, and then I could do some true proper damage with my Pandorian axe. A few more hits and I'd managed to do it. Finally, the first Hydra defeated. These guys also had some soul powers to give. I think the first one was giving me 10% extra health. So of course the first Hydra's name was Hydra, and I got a nice ring from it that would do excellent with my poison build. But no time to waste, it was still day 90 and I still had another one of these guys to take on. Let's head over to the sunken sea to find the one swimming around. Morpha's arena was the perfect place to also take on this guy. Hydra was ice based, but I wasn't expecting the ghost of Hydra to be there fighting alongside it. So I basically had two of these guys now to contend with. So pretty much the same tactics, run whenever the lasers are around. Do as much melee damage as I could, getting close and avoiding any lunges, but also had some extra fire damage I was doing now with some of my weapons and build. But it was no joke, these lasers were really hard, and again the whirlpool sucking you in and then expanding could do huge amounts of damage if you didn't get cover behind a pillar. It did have its own unique trick up its sleeve, having a basically small little pedestal that would fire off projectiles that could do a lot of damage, but once I figured that out, weirdly it was an easier fight than the first one. With it stunned, I got my chance to get the final hits in, and yes, it was done. Second Hydra defeated, second soul power, and I was building up the Hydra armor set, which would be good for particularly melee builds. So only 9 days left to see if I can defeat the final bosses, and I still had the third Hydra to take on, and that's what I did on day 91. Can you guess who came along for the party for taking on Hydra this time? Yep, the ghosts of its fallen brothers and sisters. 3 Hydras to deal with now. It was a pretty crazy fight, but I was again doing pretty good with my Pandorian armour and axe. And it wasn't long before I defeated this one as well, doing huge amount of damage with some critical hits with the axe. And just about avoiding the caving of rocks that were falling. Yes! Yeah, that was me in my reaction live as I defeated it. Remember, you can see the bulk of this Let's Play all condensed into one video through my live streams if you want to go and check out the full playlist. On day 92 I went and spoke to the core and it gave me the coordinates now of the final story boss. It would be back to the Desert of Beginnings to hopefully take on what would end up being a pretty challenging foe. But it was a long way from any teleportals and I had a ton of stuff to get through to get there. I came across some of the mazes in the Desert Beginnings, so of course I had to go and explore them. Before eventually making it to these mysterious crystals, I knew instinctively that yeah, I should probably destroy them as they were giving off radiation damage, but they were dropping something called meteor shards that would actually be able to convert into a special meteor chunk accessory. A great one for you and your nearby minions, pets or friends as it gives extra damage, although it does reduce your own armour. And now all I had to do was wait for this mysterious crystal to break open, revealing the core commander. Turns out all of them souls that I'd been collecting were simply here to go ahead and power him to his former glory to of course then try and smash me. Not 100% sure if they're alien beings that crash land or simply creatures that come from other dimensions. But it wasn't long before of course he started attacking. It's a pretty cool unique boss fight, taking care of these orbs to hopefully whittle it down and then be able to attack it fully. This was a terrible mistake. And the balls themselves did a huge amount of damage if you got too close. But with my Stormbringer gear and the Pandorium set, it really felt like I was making good progress. Utilising my chakrams again as well whenever I couldn't get close enough. The projectile triangles though were definitely a bit of a pain. But I probably got a bit too cocky and yeah, I wasn't paying enough attention to my health as well as the triangles as they wiped me out. But straight back into the fight, avoiding more of the lightning thunder charges, I whittled him down and I could get in some proper big melee hits. The next phase he would summon these purple vortex tornadoes that would do damage and suck you in, before another phase where it would summon these dark areas that you had to stay out of, otherwise they would do continual damage to you. This is when I needed all my core keeping skills, ducking and dodging, utilising my Rift Lens, hence why I think it's the most best and goated accessory in the game, to teleport in and out of danger and hopefully whittle down these balls once more, avoiding more of the lightning charges. It certainly wasn't a perfect fight as I did get taken out a few times, and just when I thought I'd managed to defeat it, no, this was just one of its first phases. I had to do it all over again. It really was an epic boss fight. Do go and watch the full live stream where I take this guy on. But after a good while I finally managed to hit the last blow and it was down. Yes! Ooh. I'd done it, in fact in good amount of time, completed Core Keeper, all the story content, taken on every boss except one, all within 100 days. Which you hadn't worked out by now is about half an hour of in-game time, so 50 hours to get to this stage. The core commander armour itself would give massive amounts of radiation damage to any creatures in and around you, as long as you wore all three, otherwise it was a good all-rounder, just giving buffs to melee, range and critical hit. And a Trinity Heart was a massive boost as well to your armour and health, giving you lots of buffs, especially when you got really low. Then it was back to the core to see the credits. I've sped them up quite a bit here, but yeah, gotta say I ended up being a bit disappointed. The usual kind of trope of just spitting you out and saying, hey, was that all just a dream or did you really experience it? But of course I did have some remnants of my journeys as I had a crystal mysteriously appear in my pocket. But is this the real end? But hold up Jade, you haven't defeated Urschleim, and in fact you still haven't taken on the Atlantean Worm. Well, it's a good thing we've got about 6 days left. After using all of my health potions in the previous fights, I desperately needed some more poison. So I did that farming Ivy for one more time. And day 95 I swam out with the fastest boat I could craft, avoiding these tentacles, to hopefully summon the Atlantean Worm. Placing the special bait pillar inside, it wasn't long before it was summoned, and this was a pretty powerful boss. You can absolutely take this guy on way before you do the core commander. It was just one of those things that I'd kind of neglected or almost forgot about until the end. The more damage you do, the more chance you've got of it then splitting into 2 or 3 Atlantean Worms. So try to take aim at the end of its body, that's the best way to defeat it. It would fire off these electric charges that could do huge amount of damage if it caught you. And of course I didn't take this guy on without dying. Which honestly kind of sucks as the bait pillar does get used up. So let's go and craft and place another one. And I might have died a second time. Can you imagine me trying this hardcore? So it took a while, but I finally narrowed it down to just 2 or 3 of the little suckers, making sure I was really using Stormbringer to good effect, avoiding powerful charges and obviously them actually getting me with their big massive spikes. But it was done. A permanent health boost with the Atlantean Worm heart, some rare fish, and another decent necklace, particularly useful against bosses, increasing the amount of damage you do. So this was it, 4 days left to take on Urschleim. Would I be able to do it? Would I heck? Certainly not the first attempt. Despite me having absolutely the maximum amount of health, damage and critical mass that I could, I just simply wasn't being able to get ahead of him, especially when it was enclosing me. That was the real big problem. It wasn't really that hard taking him on. Once you got to that point, it was just simply not getting squished. I even went and started filling in some of the gaps so I could be able to get across much quicker and not hopefully get caught. And figure I would try and boost up my magic skills as much as possible by growing some of the sunrise and the unicorn that I'd kind of maybe. Some more crafting of some of the best foods give me extra melee as well as magic damage. And pretty powerful stuff, the unusual potions give 40% extra damage for 1 minute. I also went and sold a bunch of accessories that I'd gone and crafted, trying to get special polished versions. These would give me extra buffs that well worth doing. The Swift Ring would give me 7.1% movement speed, but now extra melee damage as well. And even more once I started upgrading all of my accessories. It was day 99, I couldn't mess up anymore, I had to make sure I had the best gear possible, and I was going with actually a ranged and mage class. And here I was, honestly, on day 99, I hadn't really tried filling it with unusual stuff. In fact, I'd rushed quite a lot. As said, missing out on making automated mob farms and getting that extra help from Erica really definitely helped. But what really solved the problem in taking on Urschleim was having that ranged class. The Stormbringer's great, but you do have to be close enough for it to actually do damage. And that was my biggest problem I come to realise. I just wasn't quick enough or being able to see what was behind me as I was trying to keep my back obviously from getting cornered. It was then a case of switching over from my mage class over to my melee build and doing huge amounts of damage. And it was working. Urschleim stood no chance with the axe damage I was doing, and then just switching over so I could always stay ahead of the horrible sludge. There were some frantic moments for sure, as it was definitely getting quicker now with each phase. But I'm so glad I invested in just giving myself the best speed accessories that I could and making sure that I was keeping the range damage from a good distance. Look at all them beautiful yellow numbers. This was absolutely the closest moment I came to messing it up, but I just about managed to escape. And I was nearly done. Third and final phase. Could I finish it off before it retreated? Yes! I'd done it. I defeated the final boss of Core Keeper. All 17 of them taken care of in 100 days. These were my final skill stats. You can see so many of them still haven't been maxed out. And a big shout out to Erica for donating a couple of items as well as a lot of the golden and rare crops that would help me out with food. The fossil gear is pretty unique. I nearly got the full set with the helmet and the trousers, but this would be the only time that I would take Urschleim on. I still need to go and do a lot more farming. Pretty good for explosive builds and doing damage, pretty much like the Ultimate Forms build. More rare resources and another permanent boost to my max health. Couldn't believe it. 100 days of Core Keeper, over 50 hours of gameplay condensed down into hopefully something entertaining and guiding you through where or what you should maybe be doing. I did use a lot of this same footage to guide you through in separate guides, each different phase of the game, beginner, medium and end. So go and check them out if you want more details about exactly what kind of builds and items I was using or what bosses you should be taking on in order, but this is pretty much it. There were so many legendary weapons that I never got a chance to show you guys that I actually managed to go and get later on, like Runesong, like Soulseeker and the Phantom Spark. So maybe I'll do another appendium, an extra bonus episode of my live streams all condensed down, showing you how to get all the next legendary gear. And of course, don't forget, Core Keeper has got continuing content. There will be more stuff added, and I'll be back hopefully to show you everything you need to know. But again, thank you so much for watching if you stuck it all the way through to the end. Really do appreciate it, thank you so much, and I'll see you ratbags for more adventures in Core Keeper soon.